It's a fine line to walk between culture and productivity, finance. But the way I expressed it to him, I said, hey, it is not all about the numbers, but it is also about the numbers. Because whatever it is you do in your business, however you serve the world, you can't do that if you don't make money.
Less stress, more time, more money. Welcome to the Cash Flow Contractor Deep Dive.
So what'd you do out in Idaho?
Well, we went up to a place called Donnelly, which strangely enough I had always heard about, but it's only 300 people. It's in northern, it's north of Boise, an hour and a half. There's a huge lake there called Lake Cascade, and there's a ski resort called Tamarack, which is a local ski resort. So did some skiing and did not do any swimming, but son has a cabin up there, so we had Christmas in 4 feet of snow. It was pretty fun.
Nice. Well, that's the cabin that he just built recently or bought recently?
He bought, yeah. He didn't build it recently. It's on Airbnb. So
okay, so he's renting it out regularly?
Yeah.
So he makes you rent it out when you go there?
Well, he didn't, but we paid him some money because basically they funded it because they could have had it rented the whole time.
Yeah.
And instead we occupied it.
Man, that's a really pretty part of the country. And you got stuck there for 3.5 days, you said?
Yeah, well, we were up there for more than that, but we were due back on a Tuesday night at 7 and we got back on a Saturday morning at 1 due to the Southwest Airlines debacle.
What do you think about that? I mean, is it absurd or is it expected?
No. Well, first of all, I'm still a fan of Southwest. They're a profitable airline. They set a model they talked about a lot in Blue Ocean Strategies, the book. And, no charge bags. They're not nickel and diming you. And so I'm a big fan. No charge change fees and all that. That melted down. Of course, I have no insights on that, except that I frequently think when I'm flying how complex it must be to try to route all those people and get the pilots and the crews and the airplanes at the same place at the same time. And if there's a shift, it's like a software that would program a soccer tournament with 100 teams, right? I always thought there ought to be
10,000 teams.
Just a city software, know, and who wins what, and they can't do it on that day. They play the same day, and I'm sure there's softwares that do that. But I'm more staggered that they can run an airline than that it messes up. And evidently they had. It's an interesting thought. I don't know how it affects a lot of our listeners, but I do have clients that are this way. There are really two ways to look at business and business operations. One is from a financial standpoint, people who are concerned with EBITDA and ratios and all about how things look for the valuation of the company. And private equity firms do this. I have one company that's interfacing with one, and it's driven financially. The other way is operations, like how do I take care of things and spend less money on expense and make more profit? And the two are related, but they're different. And the reason I brought that up, or it came to mind, was as I read about Southwest, Herb Kelleher, the founder, was an operations guy. He knew the pilots, he knew the crews, he knew the people, he knew what it took, and he was concentrated on operations. The CEO between the current one and maybe two CEOs were financial guys. They're reading spreadsheets and looking at ratios. And I'm all about ratios and spreadsheets, but not to the exclusion of operations. And they neglected the operations. And the way they neglected it, to my understanding, is that they failed to update their software.
Software infrastructure.
And when it hit the limit, it exploded. And I think they canceled 13,000 flights. And they had people, it came down to things like you got a crew ready to go in Los Angeles and nobody knows it.
Yeah.
So the captain has to call somebody. And who's that guy? And how does he put that in the system? So anyway, that was an interesting highlight of the difference between financial thinking and operational thinking. And really, really, really genius, successful business people managed to meld those two. I gave a talk on this the other night to a group, and they're very sensitive to the culture and not all about the numbers and all that. And it's a fine line to walk between culture and productivity, finance. But the way I expressed it to them, I said, hey, it is not all about the numbers, but it is also about the numbers. Because whatever it is you do in your business, however you serve the world, you can't do that if you don't make money. Right?
Yeah.
And,
No, it's totally true.
yeah.
Did you get to talk to Nick about the Southwest situation? What were his thoughts?
Yeah,
that's kind of
for
what
3 days while I'm sitting there with him.
that's basically what he consults on and does sales for, right?
Yeah, he is a technical sales consultant for a company called Quest, and we're going to have the CEO on in the next 2 months. They're out in California, pretty sizable organization. And when people ask me what Nick does, I say he does technology. And it's, well, what's that, you know? Is that a gas stove, which is an improvement over a wood burning stove, or what is it? Well, it's everything. I mean, it can be security and firewalls and things like that. It could be somebody who needs to develop an app to run their business or some aspect of their business. It can be people who were ransomwared, you know, and they have a business on Monday and they're completely gone on Friday. It could be some large organization, say a big insurance company is changing out their computer system and their software, and it needs to be up what they call 5 nines, 99.999, which is an ideal. There's no such thing. But it needs to be up on Monday morning on some future date. So whatever. And I think Southwest, I don't know that Nick has talked to Southwest.
Obviously.
That might be Quest has 300 or so people available to deploy, but and they would do it. If Southwest called them, they go, sure, let's go.
Yeah, we'll be here for a few years.
Right.
Yeah. It would just be interesting to hear from his perspective. You know, I think for, you know, the small business owners that we talk to fairly frequently, it's not really comparable, but I think that if there's any lesson from it, one, if you are not using a system like that, if it's all in your head, you're going to crash. You know, if you're just relying on people to call you, kind of like Southwest was, where, okay, yeah, call me, they're going to this spot. You're not able to track and measure what your team's doing and where they're at and how your projects are going using software. You need to get on something like that, because the equivalent for the small business owner is they're sick, or they go on vacation, or they, you know, can't show up for a while because someone else in their family has an issue. Well, effectively, your system crashed because you're not there.
You know, that's a great point that you bring up, because I was talking about it yesterday and thinking about it today. Is one of our listeners' goals for the year, whether you're listening to this really early or even late in the year, ought to be that if you leave town for 2 weeks and you come back, you will not have just postponed your work, right? You still have to do it. You're just doing it 2 weeks later. You will have had systems and processes in place so the work gets done in your absence. And that's a big deal. Matter of fact, I'm suffering a little of that right now, being gone 3 days longer than I thought. Come back and I have a lot of things sitting here that individually aren't that big a deal, but when taken as a whole, I'm going to be here all weekend. And that's not being very congruent for a coach who preaches that, but that's the fact. And the thing I like about software, Khalil, and this is where you come in, is the way to defeat or the way to delegate properly is to have systems and processes and people who can run them.
Yeah.
Software is systems. I mean, it's what it is. We talk about writing them down, and I usually think English language, you know, or maybe Spanish for Sergio. But I think about writing them down. Software is systems. And for a guy like me, and this is where I need a guy like you, I long ago decided I'm not going to try to keep up with the softwares. It's not my strength. There are so many. I love it if I can go to a client and be the guy, but I need somebody like you
Yeah.
who can choose and implement and pick the best one.
Well, and I think there's danger in that kind of thinking that the software is the system. I mean, yes, there are softwares out there that are so specific to your industry, to your trade, whatever it is, that will be, in fact, a system for you. But really, I think it's more so that it forces you to create the system, and it serves as almost a template for the system. You've still got to fill it in, but it's a huge advantage to have the software to kind of be a guiding post for, okay, this is how we're going to run our systems for our business. So don't just think that, the danger is they buy the software and they think, okay, now we're systemized. Like, no, that's not how it works.
No. I don't
definitely
mean
takes some
that
work
at all.
Yeah.
I mean,
But-
the real, people don't usually think of it that way, but QuickBooks, of course, is an entire system. It's a bookkeeping system. You don't have to invent it. But when you have it, it's there. I have a prospective client who's been around a long time, and I send out a questionnaire when I work with people. I ask them, how do you keep books? And the answer I got was Excel.
Yeah. Yeah, it's real, and it's not just with books. I mean, you have clients that you talk to that are still on a server and having to pay, thousands of dollars a month for maintenance and, worried about the server crashing and losing work and stuff like that. If you're not on the cloud right now, you're wasting money, you're wasting time and energy, and you're missing out on a lot of efficiencies that you could be having. And it's really not that hard. It's way easier to get on the cloud than it is to have a server. So that's another thing going back to Southwest that you can kind of take away from it is they were outdated. They're still using a system from the 90s. It's not that you have to be a unit running the most, up to date, most new flashy thing that's out there technology wise, but you need to be with the times. You don't need to be running a system that's 20, 30 years out of date. You're missing out on too much.
That introduces kind of around the corner, but you're saying having a server in your office. The people I know who do have servers in the office tend to talk to me about things like, well, I've got to go because something's wrong with the server and we might have lost all these files and I've got to run it. Anyway, they're being IT guys, right?
Yeah.
And none of my clients are IT. Well, none of my clients are actually IT guys.
Sure.
So what they're saying is, okay, I'm going to be a business owner doing whatever I do, but I'm also going to run this computer or be an IT guy and, do the updates and all that stuff. Manage the security. And that brings to mind another conversation I've already had this week. This series that we're running right now, we're kind of in the middle of it. We call the Advisor and Mentor Checklist.
Yeah.
People a lot of times run the server because they assume that having somebody do it for them is either too expensive or too complicated or not worth the effort. A client came to me yesterday and she has employed an attorney matter of fact, Molly Aspen, who will be on here, I'm not sure of the order, but she'll be on in a week or two. She's an HR attorney. So I had a client who was stressing over some personnel issues, how to handle them, what's the proper way to dismiss this person, how much do I have to take before I can say enough is enough. And she got on with the attorney, and the attorney answered her questions, completely unburdened her mind, said this is exactly what you do and how you do it. And it costs a couple $100, right? She brought up the same point that she had always assumed that health insurance was too expensive for a real small company. So she got with one of our guests that we had on, Holly Pepler, that we had on a few weeks ago, and explained that, hey, really almost anybody can afford health to provide benefits at a different level. So there are all these assumptions about these ancillary things, insurance, health insurance, IT, HR, banking, legal, all those things. Oh, I can't afford any of that. Well, you can't afford not to do it because it occupies your mind. And just like I talk about so frequently with bookkeeping, you're not likely to be very dang good at it. So you're going to spend a lot of time, you're going to get a subpar result, all because you self-deselected the hiring a professional or mentor because you just thought whatever it was, too expensive, don't know how, all that. So
I think there's so many misconceptions that people have, and that you don't know what you don't know. And so it's just so helpful to have those advisors and mentors around, because they open up your mind to so much that's out there that you're not aware of and can help guide you in an easy way. I did this for you recently, Martin. You've been so outdated in how you search for things. You go to google.com and you search for things. But I introduced ChatGPT to you a couple weeks ago, at least. How has that changed your search habits?
Well, why don't you tell people what that is first?
Well, I'll let you describe it. It's always better to hear it in simpler forms.
I'm pretty cutting edge, man. It's a artificial intelligence. I don't want to call it a search engine, but it's a way to tap into artificial intelligence. And you go to the site and you phrase a question or make a statement or ask for an outline of something, and it searches. I was surprised to find it actually only searches a database that goes through 2020. It
21.
doesn't actually. 21? Okay. So it
And
doesn't
it's actually being
search.
updated, like it adds like a couple months every week or something like that.
Oh,
So
yeah.
it's like it's catching up.
And it's given me some answers that I said, you're not right. And I put thumbs down, and they say, well, what should it have said? And then I tell them. So it reminds me, my father was, he wasn't arrogant, but some people might think so. But we always had a dictionary, a well-thumbed dictionary, which I realized I used every day. I've got one at my house until Google came out, and I realized I hadn't touched it. But anyway, he'd look at a definition in the dictionary, cross it out, and write one in. That is not correct. So anyway, I'm doing the same thing in Chat AI. I'll just give you an example of a question. My wife has a speech language pathology clinic. Listeners probably know that, and they're as scarce as hen teeth. They're hard to come by.
Yeah.
So I just wrote the question, how to attract and keep speech language pathologists. That's not a very pointed question. And it gave me about 4 paragraphs. Point 1, point 2, what they like, what they want, what they're looking for. And it was had I refined my question more and more and more, I'd get better and better answers. But I also have had some math questions that I won't dive into.
Let's do one live. Let's do one live. Give me a question.
No, you give me the question. I'll do it. The questions are hard. Okay. How to run a podcast.
Okay, so I'm going to type that in. How
to keep people engaged in a podcast.
How to keep
contractors
listeners engaged to your podcast episodes.
Right.
Let's see what it says. So I'm searching this just as if I was on Google, but I'm going to chat.openai.com. Link will be in the show notes. You can create a free account, and you're basically chatting with artificial intelligence. This artificial intelligence has basically a huge database of every single thing that's on the internet, and has studied it and learned it so that it understands what's on the internet I think it's up to December 2021. So it's a couple years or a little over a year behind. So I'm going to say how to keep listeners engaged to your podcast episodes. And it has told me.
And it's typing as you're watching it.
Yeah, it types it out as you're going.
Yeah.
There are several ways to keep listeners engaged in your podcast episodes. 1, start strong. Begin your episode with an engaging introduction that hooks your listeners and makes them want to keep listening. 2, tell a compelling story. Use storytelling techniques like Martin likes to keep your listeners interested in the content of your episode. Number 3, keep it focused. Stay on topic, avoid rambling. We do a terrible job of that.
Oops.
As this can cause listeners to lose interest. If you're still with us, thank you. 4, vary your delivery, different tones, pacing, inflection to keep your listeners engaged and to keep things interesting. Number 5, interact with your listeners. We try to do that, but it's really hard to keep our listeners interacting with us by asking them questions and requesting their feedback. Number 6, edit and produce the episode professionally. 7, end with a call to action. So anyways, those are pretty good answers.
I know what our call to action is going to be, and I'll tell you at the end.
Oh, wow. Did you just hook people?
Well, no, here, refine that one more just for fun. How to write a good hook to engage podcast listeners.
Okay, how to write a good hook to engage podcast listeners. If you've stayed with us this point, you're following this, the way that this varies from Google is that I don't have to search through the Google results to find the answer that I like. It's just giving me what they think is the best answer in a concise format. And so it's much faster. It's almost like having a artificial assistant that you can just ask questions. But it goes even deeper. So I think this applies really well to specific jobs, in my opinion. I was talking to a friend who's a teacher. And what we did is we took for his students, the textbook is digital. So he can like copy and paste an entire chapter. So I was sitting down with them and we copied and pasted a chapter from his textbook and said, create a 30-question quiz based on this text, and copy and paste the text in there. And it gave 30 questions for a quiz that he could just use, and yeah, sure, he can go and tweak that if he needs to, but it's a starting point, which is so helpful. And I think that's what, just like we were talking about with systems for software earlier, you can use this so effectively inside of your business as a starting point for so much. Right. You're trying to run a meeting on team building. Hey, can you create an agenda for me for a team building, a detailed agenda for a team building meeting inside a small business? And it's going to give you a template of what you can use, and it's a starting point. And I think that's where it's really effective for business owners. I've used it to write an article for CFC. If you ever go to our website, you'll start to see more articles inside of our episodes. And it's actually really effective. So you can actually send a YouTube video, summarize this YouTube video for me, or write an article based on this YouTube video.
Let's do this. You write an article, you get OpenAI to write an article for you. And being ethically pure, you need to cite that. Okay? That's a question I had. So I went to OpenAI and said, how do I cite an article written by OpenAI? And it told me.
What did it say?
It gives you it says based on resource search done on OpenAI, and it gives a link. And so, it's not me trying to say, oh yeah, I wrote that. By the way, just, we're talking about giving you a general idea and what's different than Google. You can type in those things and then sort through, like you said, or it selects. But I'm not a coder, but it will do this. How do I write a code? How do I write a query in COBOL that will sum two numbers and add tax? That's so base, and it'll do it for you.
Yeah.
And I had one. This is really different. It's on the finance side. We don't need to talk about it much, but there's a principle called net present value and internal rate of return. And that's come up with one of my clients. And so we're talking about it. I know how to do that. And I know how to do it because I got an MBA, and I really haven't had to do it since, because it's not anything our listeners generally need to worry about.
Right.
But I wanted an explanation of what it meant. Okay. And I wrote a query that said, if I have this internal rate of return, does it mean I got this plus this plus this? And it gave me an answer and corrected with subtleties some of the things that you can't do that on Google, I don't think. You can go to Google and say, what's a net present value? And it'll tell you the definition of that. Or you can ask, what's an internal rate of return? And it will give you a definition. It will not explain the subtleties.
Yeah.
And I asked it to explain the subtleties, and it did. So I use OpenAI, which also for some reason is ChatGPT. Takes you to the same place. I think that's the database.
Chat.OpenAI.
Yeah. Well, I don't even think you have to do the OpenAI. ChatGPT.com takes you to the same place.
Right.
But anyway, I use that more than I use Google now, since you showed that to me, which is how we started this, because you changed my, that makes me kind of cutting edge, right?
It kind of does.
Hip.
Yeah, you're using a MacBook Pro, ChatGPT.
all due to an influencer in my life. If I could remember his dang name. Oh, Khalil.
Yeah.
I wouldn't do any of those things.
Well, it's a really cool tool. Definitely go check it out, see how it applies to your business. And I think that I've been using it a lot as well, and it's really fantastic. And I think it's only going to get better and better. And I think AI is going to become I think 2020 is going to be the year that we really start to see AI in our everyday work lives a little bit more, and then even in our everyday lives, where it's connecting to so many tools. Like, you're going to see a lot of the software that you use, including your email. I mean, like right now, I could write an email for me, telling an employee that I have to fire them. Let's do that. Write an email for me to fire an employee for poor performance, notifying them that tomorrow or today will be their last day. All right, let's see what we got. Dear employee, I'm writing to inform you that your employment with company will be terminated effective immediately. This decision is made due to your consistent poor performance and failure to meet the expectations outlined in your job description. Despite the efforts made by the management team and your colleagues to support and assist you in your role, your performance has not improved to a level that meets the needs of the company. As a result, we have decided to terminate your employment. Today will be your last day at the company. Please make sure to return any company property in your possession, including keys, badges, equipment, etc., before you leave. We appreciate the time you have spent with us and wish you the best of luck in your future endeavors. Sincerely, your name. I mean, sure, I could have written that, but it would have taken me 20 minutes probably, realistically.
Well, yeah, you have to, that blank page, editing is much easier than looking at a white piece of paper, metaphorically speaking, and saying, right? Also, that's pretty pedestrian, meaning, not particularly subtle or insightful. That would require an attorney to look at it, things like that. But that's what we anticipate getting better and better.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that
another one, but we don't have to. Another one we don't have to do, but comes to my mind anytime there is a termination involved is, give me a list of all the things I got to get back. Remember, shut off the email, get the keys, get the laptop, sign a release form.
What do I need to remember?
Do immediately upon terminating an employee. Well, that's.
Terminating an employee? What do I need to do upon immediately terminating an employee? Let's see what it says.
Yeah.
Okay, when terminating an employee, there are several steps you should take to ensure the process is handled smoothly and professionally. Inform the employee of the decision. I'm not going to read the explanation of that. Collect company property. And then terminate access to company systems, including email, database, other relevant systems. Review and pay out final wages, their final paycheck plus unpaid vacation or sick time. Communicate the news to relevant parties, such as employees' manager, team members, clients. Make sure to handle this information with discretion and sensitivity. Document the termination, including the reason for the termination and the steps taken during the process. This can be useful in event of any legal disputes. I mean, it's not groundbreaking information, but it was such a fast answer.
No, but it's going to get better and better. Yeah. Change the locks on the door.
And what I like is going into even going into detail. So like, let's go into terminate access to company systems. So I'm going to ask the ChatGPT to please go into detail of what I need to do when terminating access to company systems for after firing an employee. And then it goes into greater detail. So it's going to, says company's data, intellectual property, change passwords, including for email, social media accounts, and other company systems, revoke access to all company accounts for any online tools, remove them from company email lists and distribution groups which they belong to. Company-wide resources such as intranet, shared drives or databases. Their monitor access to company systems, so they don't have authorization to that anymore. Anyways, it just goes into more detail, and so you can refine and refine.
Right.
Another cool thing that I've seen, Martin, on this is companies that have a knowledge base, meaning like if you have a frequently asked questions, for example, on your website. Some companies only will have 5 questions there, but some companies have hundreds of questions. You can copy and paste those questions and ask the chat to learn that. And then once it knows that, you can install that chat bot from OpenAI onto your website. So that when a customer comes to your website and asks a question, it's going to know everything from your frequently asked questions and be able to answer it for you. And then it can be used as a database for even an employee who's working there to ask a question. They'll ask it, and the AI will be reading it from the database of FAQs to then answer the question for the employee to then assist the customer. So pretty wild.
Yeah.
Let's move on from OpenAI. I think it's a really cool tool. Something I saw really fascinating for people on Twitter was from a guy. This is John Matzner. I'll post to him in the show notes, but he talked about how he helped grow a service business revenue by 500% in about a year. And there were several different things. It wasn't just this, but one of this processes that he implemented was what he called the Smokey the Bear process. And Smokey the Bear has 3 levels of, danger zones.
Oh, fire
danger. Yeah. There's red, yellow, green. Red is like, okay, you can't have a fire. Yellow is, heightened risk. And then green is like, it's good to go. You can have a fire that's controlled safely. But he implemented it for his leads. And so many contractors don't really have a qualified lead definition for their company. Maybe they have it in their head, but really they're just taking any work they can get, and they're so focused on revenue. We've talked about this so much at the podcast, how if it's a sale, it's a sale. And there's some danger with that, but then there's also some truth to it. And so, yeah, like when you're in the green zone, I need to back up a little bit. See if I can explain this right. He has 3 definitions of a qualified lead based upon where they're at in their company. And he uses that process of having a red, yellow, green system. So yellow is their consistent qualified lead. And it's someone who has a project that's at least $1,000, right? So we're going to come out and replace an electric panel. It's going to be over $1,000. They need it. They want what we sell. They live within 60 minutes of our warehouse, and they're actively interested in our pricing or in our services, not just shopping prices, right? That's their standard definition of a qualified lead. But that changes based upon where the state of their company is. If they're extremely busy, then they go to red, and a qualified lead for them is a project of $5,000 or more. They don't accept anything that's less than that.
Okay.
Because it's a waste of time. We don't need to be doing $100 jobs or $1,000 jobs whenever we're busy and people are working overtime. We need jobs that are much higher value, and they need to be within 30 minutes of our warehouse, not an hour, because we're so busy. But then there's times when it gets really slow, like maybe during the holidays. Well, we go to the green level where we're completely open. It's a $100 job, bring it on. It's 90 minutes away, bring it on. Because we're paying our guys regardless. We need to keep them busy somehow, right? So I thought that was a really interesting process to go through inside of your company, is understand what those zones are for you of, hey, when we're really busy, when we're slammed, when we're low on capacity, whenever we have infinite capacity, or not infinite, but our capacity is wide open because it's really a slow season, whenever we're just at table stakes. Understanding what those zones are for you, but then also having a different definition of what a qualified opportunity is or a qualified lead, so that you can have the right kind of work in place for your business. And then you can communicate to your team, hey guys, we're in a red zone. So we're not accepting any jobs. You tell your office staff, your employees that are on the jobs, and then no, hey, we're yellow zone this week. Or no, hey, it's wide open, guys, green zone. Take on anything. Start doing some outbound calls for business.
I think that's brilliant. Probably most of our listeners do that, as you said, in their
Yeah.
head. But to define them, write them out, and then capture it by saying red, yellow, or green is brilliant.
Yeah,
Done with intent rather than just inertia.
exactly. And I think that it really helps align the team. Like if we know what zone we're in, we know what our focus is. And I would think even as an employee, if I hear the management say, hey, we're in a red zone, I kind of feel like recognized, like I'm working my ass off, and the manager recognizes it isn't going to give me this crappy job that I'm not going to get paid on that well. But they're saying, no, like you guys are working really hard. We're slammed right now. And
Right.
it allows you to also do some other things for your employees during that time. Hey, when we're in a red zone, we also, cater breakfast, or I don't know, we open it up and we pay a little bit extra or something like that. We have a bonus structure during the red zone, a lot of different things that you can do. So really interesting. Going to have somebody on the podcast, Martin. I think I'm going to exclude you from the conversation because it's going to be at a different time than our normal recording, but
Okay.
who helps grow Twitter accounts. He's really well versed in Twitter and ghost writes for people and stuff like that. But I'm going to talk to him about the value of Twitter, and I've mentioned it to you several times, but that's one of the technology adoptions that you haven't taken on, Martin, is being on Twitter. But
Yeah. Well, I'm on it.
it is
but I don't
it is
post
one of the most
anything.
valuable resources out there, and so we're going to talk about the value that you can find there, how to use Twitter as a business professional, and then if you want to join Twitter as a professional and add content and be a part of conversations, how to do that effectively. So hopefully listeners enjoy that. But it's absolutely my favorite social platform, ahead of LinkedIn, and then I would go LinkedIn. So Martin, last thing that I want to talk about today is, how are you feeling about 2023?
I'm really excited for our businesses. Excited to be alive. Really, 2022 was a better year than expected for all of my clients. I mean, we all kind of thought maybe things were going to go to hell in a handbasket with the inflation, everything that hasn't manifested itself. And so it wound up being all right, but I'm looking at 2023 as being the best year ever. I can go into the details of why that is, but that's for my business and my wife's business, but also for my clients. People are pretty enthusiastic and ready to have 2022 behind us.
Yeah. I think for myself, well, one, my dad is great, and he's probably a leader in positive thinking. But anytime it's his birthday or it's a new year, like if he's turning 65, or if it's my birthday and I'm turning 32 or whatever, say, oh man, yeah, research says that 32 is the best year, like best year of your life. Every year he says the same thing. 37, best year of your life. You're going to love it. Research shows that like people are happiest at 37, and he does that, and he'll say it to anybody and they'll believe
he's a
it. And it's like
PhD
amazing
too.
to see how that changes their thinking.
Oh yeah.
But then also he'll do that for the new year. I'll ask like, yeah, how was your new year? He's like, that I'm so excited. Everybody keeps saying that this is going to be the year. This is the year that everything's going to go so well. So anyways, I felt that from you a little bit, that 2023 is going to be the best year. And if you think it probably will be.
It will be.
But I think also I've seen some, I get to work with some businesses that are really tied to mortgages and interest rates. And I think those businesses are struggling quite a bit. I think that if you're a contractor and you're really tied to new construction, there is a housing shortage. So you will be able to probably still do some new construction work, but it's not going to be as wide open. I'm hearing from a lot of people that, they used to be able to, you weren't even taking bids a lot of the time because they were so swamped, but they used to be able to just throw a number out there and it was sold because it was so busy. But that's changing. They're having to, really watch their margins and watch what they're bidding, because people are taking the lowest bidder again because it's kind of opened up. But I think that this is a really, for a lot of businesses, this is where they're going to have to really focus on their books more than ever. They're really going to have to pay attention to their expenses. I think inflation combined with interest rates for construction companies is going to make it a little bit challenging if you're not paying attention to those things. And you're going to see a lot of people probably just bidding work to get work. And if you can avoid that at all costs, that
until they run out of money. I will say this, I do have a builder, pretty substantial builder as a client in a mortgage company, and matter of fact, me working with the builder, my emphasis always is on build times. Get the damn thing built, get your money back. That's the biggest single expense in controllable expense is interest that you pay. But I was concentrating on getting his balance sheet reduced, inventory down, cash up, debt off the books, which meant retract, lay off and all this. He wound up selling 9 times more houses than I thought.
Wow.
I said, well, you have to make concessions? Yeah, but he still had healthy margins.
Good.
So that was a surprise, and that's still going on. And the mortgage companies, it's not at all like it was boom and bust last year. All you had to do is throw a hook in the water and you caught a trout. But there's an uptick in that as well. I think people are
optimistic,
resolving themselves. If interest rates go to 7 and they go back down to 6, they go, hey, interest rates are up, right? And then refinance, but people still have to live places, and they can do it by rent they're all the issues. They've got qualified for X amount of debt, but it has not wound up being the disaster that was easy to imagine.
Right.
At least not yet.
At least not yet. Well, and
that's pretty negative.
Yeah, at least not yet is really negative.
At least not yet. No, it's not a disaster, and it's not going to be. How's that?
Yeah, it's only a disaster if you think it is, right? Even whenever times are bad, you can still find a silver lining. And again, we are in Oklahoma. It's a lot different from state to state, especially coast to coast. We'd love to hear from listeners on what things are like for them, stories about jobs getting canceled or postponed, or, material pricing, what the supply chain's like, what they're seeing inside their companies with employees and hiring people, having let people go, whatever it might be. So if you've got stories of what it's like in your neck of the woods, let us know. We'd love to hear that and talk about it.
And 2 other calls to action.
Oh yeah, you gave us a hook earlier that you had a good call to action.
Yeah, well, I have 2 now. One is to spend a few minutes and think about that red, yellow, green criteria. That is brilliant, and you ought to be able to do that pretty quickly. Write it down, refine it a little bit if you want for a few days, and then make it known. The second one is go to chatgdp.com or
chat.openai.com.
Chat.
It's in the show notes.
Right. And any question you want, how big should the diamond be for my son's fiance? I don't know. That would, anything, just try it. And I've got a few clients, your influence spreads, Khalil, because I've told a few clients about it. They're coming back, they go, hey, that thing's pretty interesting. And it'll only get better and better. The only bad part of it is sometimes the answers are pretty white bread, but sometimes they're really insightful. But I'm just anticipating the more and more it gets used, the better and better the answers will be.
Yeah, I think the best way to use it, for me at least, is just thinking about something that you need to do and then asking the AI to do it. So if that's writing an email, if that's coming up with a plan, if that's coming up with a meeting agenda, those are things that I've done recently. If it's coming up with advice for somebody, like somebody asks me a question, I sometimes just throw it into ChatGPT, and oftentimes it's not giving me the final answer, but it's at least getting my train of thought. Like, oh yeah, like we used it a couple of weeks ago for a episode of like, what should we talk about? And I don't want to say that it dictated exactly what we said, but it definitely came up with an outline for us. So yeah,
right,
pretty valuable. Well, Martin, always good talking to you. Glad you made it back from Idaho eventually, and hope that you're able to get through all the accumulation that you have from your extended vacay.
I absolutely will. I just might grumble a little bit while I'm doing it.
All right. We'll see you around.
Okay. See you, man.
Thanks for listening to The Cashflow Contractor. Check out our website in the show notes or visit thecashflowcontractor.com.